Welcome to this episode of Guftagu. My name is Ejaz Haider. This is the second part of our conversation with Dr. Moeed Yusuf. So, what we basically discussing was that there was a public version of Pakistan's first comprehensive national security policy. It was released back in 14th January 2022 by then Prime Minister Imran Khan. The policy had drawn on inputs from various quarters, and the process took more than a year. And it got inputs from various attempts, previous attempts to formulate such a policy, although those attempts never reached fruition. This particular policy prioritized economic and human security as core elements of national security, and the term that was used was cooperative geoeconomics, which contrasted the hard security approach of geopolitics with cooperation, trade, and connectivity. And this policy was for 4 years, which essentially means that next year in 2026, it will have to be revisited. Now, Dr. Moeed Yusuf moved on from his position as National Security Advisor, is currently the president of Beacon House National University. But he has been referring to this, and he wrote an earlier paper which was in trying to explain this whole idea of geoeconomics. And that paper was titled Pakistan's Geoeconomic Pivot Strategies, Opportunities, and Challenges. And that report or paper tried to unpack the concept of geoeconomics in Pakistan's context. It was important because the term, as it originated in the United States, had a different, more sort of Machiavellian or Hobbesian, if you will, connotations. Now, given the fast changing geopolitical scene, especially since the election of Donald Trump, as we discussed in the previous program, also, Yusuf has followed up the previous paper with a recent one titled Going Against the Grain, Implementing Pakistan's Geoeconomic Pivot Amidst Geopolitical Chaos. And this paper revisits the concept of cooperative geoeconomics pivot in light of global and regional environment and changes this context may necessitate. So we are going to talk about this in the second episode. Mohit, so essentially, there are structural constraints, external and internal. How do we implement this given those constraints? Some of those constraints we talked about in the previous episode. But let's try and identify, let's begin with the internal structural constraints that we have.
Just first of all, thank you again for doing this. You see, I would argue there's a different way of coming at it. Before anything else, and this report that you've mentioned, the recent one, lays this out quite clearly and in detail. Before anything else, you've got to answer a question honestly: are we committed to the vision or not? So, if the state apparatus as a whole is committed to that vision, then I think that's the direction. And yes, there should be revisions. The policy actually was for 5 years, so it'll end at the end of 26. So there's a year to go, and it took us, I think, more than 2 years to do it, not a year. But doesn't matter because it's there. I think it'll take a year now. I mean, probably of consultations and whatever for those who will be doing this if they do. But are we committed to the vision or not? If we are not committed to the vision, there is no problem. That's okay. But then we need to come up with as coherent an alternative vision. What worries me a lot is that when people talk about, oh, geoeconomics, cooperative geoeconomics in today's world, what are you talking about? This can't work. And when I ask them, okay, so what's the alternative? The answer is, we don't know, there isn't any.
No, I agree. You see, the thing is, we talked about this in the previous episode also, that there is no real alternative, and you cannot dismiss this out of hand. As a matter of fact, to the best of my knowledge, ever since this policy was released, the public version, it's being talked about in the official schools of instruction. Just like we keep talking about elements of national power and the rest of it. So that means that there is a reference, constant reference in the officialdom
Yeah.
to this policy.
Yeah.
And
No.
therefore, it stands to reason that the current government should start work on this in order for them to come up with whatever version that they want to come up with, whether completely rejecting this or just improving on this by
Yeah,
the end
yeah,
of 2026.
yeah.
So that is clear. But one of the things, the reason I talked about the structural constraint, one of the things that which is clear in the original NSP also, and which you talked about in this paper also, which is under discussion, is, and you have given details of how to go about it in terms of what kind of ministries have to coordinate, what kind of nerve center you have to create, how you have to basically bring together your geopolitical diplomacy with your geoeconomic diplomacy. So, my point is, do you think we are ready for that?
Sure. So, with that out of the way, I don't know what the definition of ready is. Nobody is ever going to be 100% ready, but I think we have those building blocks in place. If you've got to move in this direction, the first thing is that economic diplomacy has to become the central sort of focus and pillar of your action. Political diplomacy is when we go and lobby about things around geopolitics, our issues around that, which should continue, obviously should continue, but we need to invest much more time in economic diplomacy. What does economic diplomacy mean for the purpose of what we are talking about? Simply trying to achieve the economic security vision of the national security policy. Again, export, FDI, manpower export, and regional connectivity, essentially. So the first question is, who is responsible for economic diplomacy in the federal government of Pakistan? You will never get an answer to this question because the real answer is everybody and nobody. So the first thing we have to do is identify what are the key ministries who are going to be responsible for any part of economic diplomacy. In my paper, I list them out, but essentially you need the MOFAs of the world, commerce, industries, IT, food security, and then the interprovincial coordination ministry with the provinces involved, because one way or another they have a piece of the economic diplomacy pie. If you ask some of these ministries, they will tell you they don't know what their role is. So we've got to build that in. The second question comes, who's going to coordinate all of this? So at the time that I was in government, it was the Office of the National Security Advisor that played the coordinating role, as is done in multiple countries. At this point, I don't know if that's on the table. If it is, great. If it's not, then it has to be some central function. It can't be a bureaucratic office doing this. It has to be somebody with the heft, with the sort of authorization from the very top, from the Prime Minister, and then able to convene all these ministries on these issues. I could think of the Deputy Prime Minister's office, maybe, if that's empowered. I'm not in the system, so I can't really say who's going to take up this mantle, but the Prime Minister has to authorize somebody to do this and then move that forward. This is hard work, this is tough work, but you've got to bring this together. Second, if you're going to go to economic diplomacy, the question comes, who's selling you in the world? Are the diplomats of Pakistan trained in this craft? The answer is not really. The commercial, the trade and investment officers, individually very good, but the world has moved on. So, can you have the same person go to Apple and talk about softwares as you would have somebody go to a country and talk about medical tourism or selling or exporting rice, or to bring in investment in a highly specialized field like oil refineries or critical minerals? The answer is no. No country can do that. So your TIOs now have to become only the coordinating function. You need to now hire private sector people, either from Pakistan or the host country, or private sector organizations who specialize in this craft of getting you exports and FDI and even manpower exports, right? That's the change you need to make. If you want to get more Pakistani skilled, you have to have training centers. When they go out, you need to have migration agreements. India has a migration agreement with EU countries. So much easier for them to get their people in rather than us, right? I still remember when I was in government, the Japanese came to us, offering us, I think, 100 or whatever slots in a particular field. For a year, we could not identify a single person who could go because of the red tape. So, those are things that we need to work on. But economic diplomacy is where all your KPIs have to be. That's how you measure performance of people. That's how the ACR should be written, or at least a large part of it for these kind of people who are involved. And then you may see that change. In terms of regional connectivity, I think that's again a more question of how you manage relationships. But your the land border or land port authority that's come up, that's the right idea. You need much better border management, customs, etc., if you have to achieve that. And then I think underpinning all of this is whether you can achieve peace within the country, whether you can build coalitions with enough middle powers and the US and China to bring in investment and stakes in a way. I'll repeat this sentence, you've heard me say this before, that the cost of an unstable Pakistan becomes greater than the cost of a stable Pakistan for your friends and foes alike. Which means what? That US, China, Saudi Arabia, India, all of them begin to believe that an unstable Pakistan is going to cost them more, right? How do you make them interdependent on your economy? If I were to put it very simply, the SIFC or BOI and provinces need to come up with at least a dozen projects, major projects, where you have Western and Chinese investment cohabited, where you have these two poles plus others. So Recodic is a very good example. The Canadians, of course, are there. American interest is now very clear. The Chinese have also bid for parts of that in terms of locomotives, etc. You need to combine all of this. You bring this together. That is a place where they will then prevent the use of Afghan soil and tell those who are trying to blow up foreigners and Chinese citizens, whatever, not to do that. I think that's your best bet if you want to get this going. Now, this is a heavy lift. We are not there. We are not close to being there. But unless we start doing that now, I don't think we'll ever get there.
So, one of the things that I've picked up from what you're saying is that we have to bring in people with domain knowledge and expertise. Now, our bureaucracy has basically functioned on the basis of uh, generalism, I would say. I mean, one of the most important arms of our civil bureaucracy is the district management group, which is a general cadre. And the rest of the bureaucratic departments, of course, do focus on domain knowledge. But what you are suggesting is uh, kind of radical from that point of view, but also absolutely commonsensical. Like, I would say almost a no-brainer. But just to, because while you were speaking, I pulled up your report. For
Ijaz, can I
instance,
say one thing?
yeah,
This one line. When common sense becomes radical, you know you're in trouble. Look, I
yeah, that
mean,
is,
your own sentence is an oxymoron. What are you
yeah,
saying?
I know.
You're saying that it's common sense that Pakistan should do X, and then you're saying, oh my God, that's radical. That means we are so wedded to the status quo that
Yeah,
a change that is long overdue, we are unable to bring, right? I
absolutely.
have very high regard for our civil bureaucracy. I actually worked with a lot of them when I was in government. Super smart individually. The system, when it comes together, competes rather than collaborates. That's
Yeah,
fundamentally your problem. Unless and until you've got domain knowledge in the system making decisions, and the best implementers of the world, which are your civil bureaucracy implementing, I don't think this will go where you want it to go. Right?
absolutely. Listen, I just, while you were talking, I pulled up your report. And it says only the ministries of commerce and foreign affairs have been involved for the most part in economic diplomacy. And even here, institutional turf battles have regularly undermined a synergetic approach. Most other ministries readily accept that they have no comprehension of how they fit in, even if they are performing functions that are critical to economic diplomacy. And then, of course, in the rest of the paper, you basically explain how you can have this whole of government approach. But my point is, and I think we have, bilaterally talked about this earlier also, that while there is geopolitical chaos, as your paper says in its title, my own sense is that if we were less structurally constrained at home, we would probably be, it'll be easier for us to deal with the chaos outside. The issue is that I think there is a bigger challenge at home than there is, the challenges that are external to us.
I think that's also common sense, right? I mean, if you've got your building blocks in place domestically, it's easier for you to make that jump and leapfrog. I mean, that's a given. Look, we keep talking about export-led growth, right? Even now, this is the conversation. How do we get there? Every strategy is saying that Pakistan doesn't have the capacity to produce enough to leapfrog across the export spectrum, right? Somebody has to do something structurally for that to happen. It's not just a matter of somebody putting up another industrial plant or a factory or whatever it is. There are many, many more things that have to happen. That incentive structure that is not in place has to come in place. But fundamentally, just if I may say, there are two things. If you can do two things, maybe things will start opening up. Number one, the way the structure of the bureaucracy or the public sector overall is set up, if I were to prioritize or list the priorities of individuals, by far number one is institutional defense. The ministry you belong to, the office you belong to, the service you belong to, whatever it may be. If you are a good, honest bureaucrat, number two is national interest, and number three is personal interest. If you are not an honest bureaucrat, you are a corrupt or a incompetent bureaucrat, more than likely it's going to be personal interest and then national interest, right? But number one is going to be that tough. One, we have to change that. There have to be incentive structures. You can't put a gun to somebody's head and say, change your culture, change your thinking. It's not done out of anything nefarious. That's how it's developed over time. That's how the perverse incentive structures are set up. The second thing is we have to create a mechanism almost like a private company where your promotions, your incentives, which should be much more handsome than they are directly linked to KPIs of economic diplomacy. If these two things can be done, I think gradually you will start finding that space open up, right? If you are going to have a system that prizes mediocrity over all else, anybody above mediocrity will become a threat to the system. It's as simple as that. And that, I think, is where overall, unfortunately, Pakistan's public sector has stalled. So those things have to change. It's no rocket science. Just study Vietnam. What did they do? Just study countries who have really done this. Many people say, well, China, Vietnam, not comparable. You can look at India, right? I mean, the export base has to be broad enough, and none of this will work, with all due respect. None of this will work. And I say this not as the author of the report or anything, and frankly, this doesn't belong to the NSP conversation. But I can guarantee you, none of this will work if your honest, salary earning citizen believes that they will be squeezed to death by something called the oppressive tax regime. Right? It will not work. The capital investor will not invest because of how convoluted and oppressive our tax regime has become. I hate to say this. I'm somebody who lived abroad, as you know, for 2 decades. Every year, I filed a Pakistani tax and paid Pakistani tax just because I believed it was a duty as a citizen. I didn't have to because I was a non-resident. But I have to tell you that honest white-collar people, even blue-collar people who are paying taxes to subsidize the lifestyles of your powerful elite on whom no law applies. That's the reality. This is not a conversation about which your private sector, public sector, this or that. This economy is purely captured by a small segment of the elite who are perpetually using power structures to benefit themselves. And
No,
for
but
an average citizen,
I totally agree with you. I mean, but
you
here's
agree
the
with me
point.
because you are one of those who's at the
No,
receiving
no,
end.
I have actually described this there is a river in Greek mythology called Styx. It's a river that separates the dead, which are the filers, from the living, which are the non-filers, or which are not part of the system. So you and I are that side of river Styx, where we are part of the system, and therefore the system has decided to squeeze us to the point where I guess nothing will come out of
Yeah,
us
I think
further.
I've detracted because, as I said, this is
No,
not
no, but
fundamentally
no, no.
about
I'm
the
happy.
NSP.
I'm happy for this detraction because you see the thing is that the lofty aims of national security policy they start at the very base. I mean, these are the structural constraints that I was talking about, and this is just one of those.
देखिए, let me just say this. Unless your average citizen is comfortable with the social contract, I'm not saying it's good, bad, ugly, unless a overwhelming majority is comfortable with the makeup of the social contract, I don't think you will get that kind of momentum behind investment, behind economic activity, behind sort of the results that we are looking for, which will drive you in the geoeconomic vision. The danger is if you do not move in that direction, then the muscle memory and the institutional memory only knows one thing, which is to play the global chessboard well, use that to get assistance, run the country for another year, then look for the next bout of assistance. The entire philosophy of the NSP agreed to by every single actor that matters, civilian, military, province, federal, and by the way, all political parties, whether that's formal or not, was that that system will no longer hold for Pakistan. It will take us to a path or to an end where we won't be able to recover. So the whole philosophy was to get out of that. And unless you move in this geoeconomic direction fast enough, I'm afraid the commonsensical answer is, that's not happening. To at least do what we know so that we survive another year and 2 years and 3 years and 4 years. For 75 years, we've tried this. That's what we wanted to get out of. And if we are unable to get out of that, then I'm afraid you will remain in this kind of sort of broken economic model, and it's not going to be able to sustain 250 million. It may have sustained 100, it may have sustained 150, not 250 million, who will be out of water and an environment where they can breathe in 20 years' time. That's data. That's not me or you. That's just simply data.
Yeah. No, I'm going to close this episode on one observation, which is that, and I think this is something I'm going to take this paper to two independent scholars also and do episodes with them. And then
Sure.
I'm going to send those episodes to you to watch
Sure.
and then circle back to you for the final episode, which is going to be the fifth one, after you have watched and after you've heard that what those independent scholars are saying. So that's one thing.
It's look, yeah, it's ironic. Again, uh, I am very uncomfortable. I'm not saying this to you, I'm just generally saying it. I'm very uncomfortable to be seen as the person who walks in any policy discussion and kind of friends laugh and say, NSP has showed up or the Mr. Geoeconomics have showed up. In a country this large with such brain power, there should be 1,000 people debating, not supporting, debating this all the time and saying, yeah, where do we need to go? Right? So your fifth episode should not be with me. It should be with me and 10 other people who have a view on this so that there could be a debate which takes us in a direction where whenever this NSP is rewritten, we come out with an outcome that's able to sustain itself, right? Otherwise, I'm a broken
Okay.
record. I'll keep saying this
Oh,
because
okay.
I
Okay.
know.
So we're gonna do that. We're gonna get we can't get too many people, but we're gonna get at least two more with you so that we finish this sort of round it up with some kind of debate. But the other thing that I think is important is that given the situation in which we are in, internally as well as externally, my own sense is that, and I want your quick comment on that before we sign off, that instead of trying to do too many things, we need to identify areas, focus on them.
Yeah.
We can create centers of excellence. For instance, just to give you an example, and although I don't want to get into a comparison of apples and oranges, but despite our resource constraint and everything, we did do something right at the Pakistan Air Force in order for that force to become as potent and cutting edge as it has become. So I think
Yeah.
something like that we have to do by identifying
Yeah.
certain areas
Mhm.
and then really focusing on those areas.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no, no, no. Look, I think we beat up on ourselves a lot. We should, because introspection is great to move forward. Pakistan's many, many, many successful examples in pockets. When it comes together, it doesn't look as good. But I mean, it's not true. I mean, even in sort of this space, I mean, if you look at sort of the achievements of Nadra, and there's a lot there. That's we are definitely not at a point where somebody can say we don't know how to do this. We were the Asian tiger of the '60s, so clearly we can do that. You are absolutely right. We need to focus. That's why I identified for you that there have to be these certain sort of sectors where you look at things. Certain things you just have to take as constant, right? The region is not going to improve by the looks of it.
Yeah,
This Indian government, I don't think is about to return to its senses. So that's a constant. I think you almost have to take as a constant, unfortunately, that our institutional efficiency in terms of delivery of projects is not going to grow astronomically, right? Maybe you have to take as a constant that our social contact will remain contested for the foreseeable future. All of those taken as constants, then you identify what are those one, two, three, four things. So that's why I mentioned identify 12 specific projects, a dozen projects, major projects where you can get this melting pot idea going and just hand those over to people or conglomerates or whatever who will deliver for you. So that's exactly how you have to do this. The average Pakistani politician leader, I think I'm making this up, inaugurates every project about 3 times before the project gets going, right? Because we're in the business of cutting fitas whenever we feel like it. So what happens is that any government has 100 projects, the capacity is to complete 20. When you distribute resources for 100, not one gets completed. So we don't want to go there. We should just have those 20 or 10 or 5 or whatever and focus on those. Once you are through that, then you go to the next one.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Moeed Yusuf, currently president of Beacon House National University, former national security advisor of Pakistan, uh, NSP, and the two papers that he did. We just about especially this recent one, but also, although that has not been under discussion, there was yet another paper that Dr. Yusuf did, which was looking at the 21st century champions that have actually been able to work out these things despite multiple constraints. And I think that is also something that needs to be looked at. But thank you so much, Mohit,
You're
for
welcome.
your time. And I will definitely now, after having spoken to two independent scholars, circle back to you with two people, preferably those who might want to challenge you.
Yeah.
But until then, it's goodbye from me now and stay safe.
Thank you very much.